On today's show, have you heard about this new movie that opens this weekend? Something called Avengers. And I don't know what it's all about, but there are 300 million reasons why you might want to know what's going on with it this weekend. That's on today's Money in the Morning. Well, hey there. Welcome to Money in the Morning, the show where we dive into a buzzy headline. And this week is obviously no exception, with Marvel's Avengers Endgame opening in theaters across the country and across the world. We're going to talk about what that means to you and to your money, and maybe give you a little financial pep talk today on Money in the Morning. So I don't know if you know this. I'm probably the first person to tell you there's a brand new movie opening. I know. Shock. What is it? There's this thing called Marvel. You probably haven't heard of it. They have a bunch of superheroes. They get together. You might want to go watch the first one because this is actually the second half of a thing. I know. You probably missed that too. I don't know if there's anywhere you can look without knowing about this movie. So we're going to dive into what they're saying here about Avengers Endgame at Variety. So let's get this party started. Laura?
Good morning. You supply the coffee. We'll bring the headlines. Here they come.
We do this podcast live in front of a Facebook audience, and they just got to see me do that for the second time. Because what's always fun about this, and the fact that we do this live, we don't edit the show once we actually get into it. So even for you people listening later on, we don't edit anything. Half the fun is seeing if I actually make it through without screwing up. Today, we made it about, 2 minutes in before we realized I hadn't even pressed the record button. Hopefully it gets better from there. And actually, I think it will, because this first headline's a doozy. I don't know if you know what type of a movie Avengers Endgame is when it comes to the box office, but this has been a franchise that's lit it up, has completely lit it up. All the Marvel movies do very well, obviously. Box office-wise, this one expected to set some records. We're going to go to Variety for this headline, and this piece written by Rebecca Rubin. Avengers Endgame, why a $300 million opening could be impossible. Impossible, she says. Let's read. Avengers Endgame is preparing for a staggering debut between $250 million and $268 million in North America alone. Unprecedented anticipation surrounding the Marvel juggernaut has some particularly optimistic box office watchers tossing around even higher numbers, estimating the superhero tentpole could clear nearly $300 million in tent sales in its first 3 days. If any film could reach that benchmark, Avengers Endgame certainly seems like the best contender. But is it even possible for any single film to top that number in one weekend? The naturally limited amount of available seats and showtimes in a given day makes that difficult pinnacle for any movie to reach. The taxing 3 hour and 1 minute runtime of Endgame limits the screenings each day, making it even more challenging. The most money the entire domestic box office has ever generated in a single weekend is $314 million. According to ComScore, that came with the launch of Avengers Infinity War in 2018. And the superhero sequel accounted for a record $257.7 million of that haul. The remaining movies showing that same weekend pulled in a combined $56 million. Second biggest industry weekend, $313 million, when Star Wars The Force Awakens debuted in 2015 with $247 million. If Avengers Endgame were to make $300 million alone, it would mean that nearly every other film that's currently in theaters would barely attract any audience at all. Of course, there aren't many new offerings on the marquee, since studios steered clear of releasing a movie that could get crushed by the superhero tentpole. But assuming theaters are still allocating at least some screens to films that aren't Marvel-related, the domestic box office would have to reach unparalleled heights. For one movie to do $300 million would be unprecedented, said Paul Dargabedian, a senior media analyst at ComScore. The potential's there for a record, but I don't even know if it's possible. He added, for some fans, this is the holy grail. That's why we're so caught up in this guessing game of how high the numbers alone can go in Endgame. I think it's funny how much Endgame mania has reached so many people. I actually saw a piece. This is when you know it's a hot movie. There was a piece that I read this morning about, it was a spoiler-free piece about the best times to go to the bathroom. At 3 hours long, if you can't hold it, when you go to the bathroom, you don't want to miss something, right? When you go, they've written something for that. How many movies have a bathroom guide attached to them? 3 hours and 1 minute. That's ugly. That is ugly. I came down, we talk about movies sometimes on Stacking Benjamins. And the first one, this series, I got to say I didn't love the first half. Didn't love it. Hope this is a lot better. I don't know. You getting superhero fatigue? I might be. Let's not talk about superheroes, though. Let's talk about why we bring this up on this show, because this ostensibly is a money show, not a Comic-Con show. Here's the reason why. What I find interesting is a lot of people will look at something like this and they'll go, oh my God, these big, huge studios, look at what they do. Look at the cool things that they make. It's amazing. If I had that kind of money and I could do XYZ, I would go do this thing. And the funny thing is that you can, because Marvel Endgame is not the beginning of this franchise. It's not by a long shot the beginning of this franchise. Stan Lee and other people that created these Marvel superheroes around him created this a long time ago. And you know what? They did it in obscurity. And if you're somebody who's wrestling with debt, if you're at the bottom of the bottom, and I've been there, I remember running out of gas alongside a road, digging in the back seat of my minivan for quarters to try to have enough money to put enough gas in to just get home, because I couldn't get home. And if you're in that spot, if you're there, Stan Lee was there once. The people that created this stuff were there once. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's this concept that they talked about called a tent pole. And I love this idea of a tent pole because of the fact that I think it works for everything that we do. See, if we create a solid foundation and then we can work around that. Here's what happens when it comes to any property. They call it an IP, right? Intellectual property. Any property that they have now. It isn't just about a character or a movie. You even look at Avengers, by the way. This isn't just one tent pole. These are lots of smaller tent poles that came together. Now they got all the superheroes fighting together in one movie. It's amazing. You know how you build that? They built it one person at a time. They built it starting with a comic book and then a sister comic book. And they made sure those were successful. And then they went from there. But this idea of a tent pole, you start off with a property, let's say the movie Avengers, and then you have the board game, you have the book series, you have clothing, you have the DVD later, you have the behind the scenes extra, right? The making of, you've all these other things that revolve around that same IP. And it can be the same for you. If you're making money at your real job, whatever that is, what are some things that you can do? If you're somebody looking for more income, what are some things you can do to use that as a tent pole to do more things? I saw a guy, Aaron Mahnke from Lore, great podcast, by the way, the Lore podcast. He gave one of my favorite talks at a podcasting conference this last year in Philadelphia. And he talked about the Transformers version of your podcast and what you do, right? What is the Transformer version of what you do? In other words, you've got this job, you've got these income streams. What are the Transformers versions of those income streams so you can maybe make more money? That's what Marvel has picked the lock on. And actually, if you think about it, Stan Lee didn't start there. He actually brought in smarter people, AKA sold the business, right? Business got sold. I mean, I know it was a long and ugly thing, and it wasn't all just Stan Lee, and there were lots of fights and lots of other people, and so we don't have time to get into all that. But to make it really short, Lots of smart people came together and built this franchise. Cool stuff. Absolutely love it. Not sure I'm going to love this movie, but I absolutely love that. And I think our takeaway from piece number 1, building your masterpiece, start with the basics. Start with the basics, work your way up, and you too will have your infinity endgame. 300 million.
This show is created by Joe Saul-Sehy, hosted and produced by Bobby Rebell and Joe Saul-Sehy, is engineered by Caden Thompson, and all put together by a pack of well-trained ferrets down here in Joe's mom's basement. You'll find Bobby at the Financial Grown-Up Podcast and Joe at the Stacking Benjamins Show. Go say hi to them there, too. Online, visit us on Twitter at Average Joe Money and at Bobby Rebell, or come join a live recording at our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/iStackBenjamins. I know you already know this too, but Money in the Morning is for entertainment purposes only. You should not act on anything recommended by a bunch of entertainers in a basement or even a Manhattan kitchen without first consulting your financial advisor. And second, dude, have your head examined. Have headlines you'd like us to discuss? Send them to joe@stackingbenjamins.com or put them on our Stacking Benjamins closed Facebook group. This show is a collaboration of Stacking Benjamins LLC and BRK Media LLC. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor Doug, and I reserve the right to always say, we'll see you next time back here on Money in the Morning.